Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer. I hate you already, Jacob. I swear to God, because you had to open that at the moment we went live.
Right at the moment.
All right. Well,
that should set the tone right from the top of the show.
All right. So,
oh my God.
Hello, everyone. Prepare for Chaos Ball. There we go. All right. So, Tom is here. How you doing, Tom? Good to have you, buddy.
Yep. Hey, friends.
Good Lord. Tom's in a sad mood tonight, everyone. So why don't you be nice to him and send him little positive messages so he can cheer himself up? He's bringing us down. Fortunately, we have brought in the greatest counterbalance to dour Tom in the history of the universe.
David Griffin.
It's Jacob. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I could not be better, my friend. Jacob, of course, is part of the Nashville scene and a sportsman,
a true sportsman.
Yes.
How many top threes have you gotten in sports, Jacob?
Probably 5 or 6. This is gonna sound like an asshole thing. I don't really keep track. Exactly. If you knew the number, by definition, you would not deserve the trophies. No, the thing is, I don't deserve the trophy. I work really hard for those sports awards, and then I hand them to my wife, and she sticks them in a cupboard because she wants to feel like she married a winner. But I don't actually keep track of them after they've happened. I'm moving on to the next one.
That is exactly how a best sportsman should roll. Also joining us this week, it's Mr. David Griffin, the TO of Nashcon. How you doing, brother?
Wait. Hello, friends.
There you go.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'm there for you, Tom. I'm here for you.
Thanks, buddy.
All right.
Yeah.
So we've got a full house tonight, and we're going to be discussing many things. We're going to talk a little bit about Nashcon. We're also going to talk about Stormcast. I wanted to talk about Stormcast because David rolled them out recently at Adepticon, so I knew he had some experience with them. But I'm also fast. First of all, we haven't talked about them in a while, which as I looked back over the show,
a year.
Yeah, it's been a year.
Yeah, we talked about them with Chuck last April because that's when I rolled out the Vanguard Wing magic, and you're like, "No, Vanguard Wing's terrible, Tom. Liberators will never kill anything." That's a verbatim quote. You can go look at the video.
I will go look at the video afterward. I'll admit I was down on it. I don't know that that's my exact quote. That's what I'm disputing here.
Yeah, you are way overestimating the killing power of Liberators.
Fair enough. But
only 6 grand hammers.
Well, yeah, exactly. But at any rate, regardless of my inability to understand the power of Vanguard Wing last April, I realized that it was strange we hadn't talked about the Golden Boys. I want to actually look at them more holistically. Because I do find them fascinating, and as some of the news points to, we may be seeing we may be seeing them rear their golden heads once again here, not too far away. So, Tom, start us off, buddy. Let's talk about some news, man. What do we got? I wanted to make everyone think we had froze for a second. I thought that'd be fun. Okay, go ahead.
Rumor engine.
Rumor has it that Adele makes some pretty good music. All right, so here we go. How have I never made that joke ever? That seems improbable.
So it's a winner.
Yeah, it's a big one. All right, here you go.
Hair.
Rumor engine. It's hair.
The wave. Because I don't know.
No, that's hair.
That's hair. But it's conjoined hair, right?
So maybe like a double top knot. They love top knots.
Is it like a pony's tail and its mane?
Could be. So we could be dealing with like a very long mane flowing off the back of something and a little ponytail.
Those could be fins. I know we're saying that it's not.
It's not Ideneth. We've seen what Ideneth is.
You ain't wrong, but it doesn't mean I'm also wrong.
It does. It does.
All right, I'm going to go off on a limb here. I think that it's, we got the double tail guy from Ideneth. It's not Ideneth, but I think that it's some double tail thing, and those are 2 of its little fur on the end of the tail.
Sort of Marathi-like.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Or doesn't Lord Ackleor have 2 tails?
It does.
I'm gonna push back and actually say it's probably a diorama-esque miniature, something we haven't seen before. So think about multiple multiple elven warriors in a little unit of 3 on a 40 mil base, dancing together with their tassels.
Yeah, some sort of cart that moves without anything pushing it, perhaps?
I mean, maybe. Like, we've seen all those models, but I would think something high elfy.
Or it could be a Shadespire Ideneth crew.
That'd be sweet.
That could be. Like, I won't disagree that that's not an entirely real possibility. Like, we got to think about Shadespire and the fact that it's delayed. It could be a daughter's Shadespire crew, right? By that same definition.
That's a good call.
Because
I mean, very daughters-ish.
Yeah, it does. It looks very much like their hair. Although I will say that their hair doesn't tend to have exactly this. Like, I've painted a lot of this hair recently, and it tends to have swoops that come in a little farther. It doesn't have these little pokey bits as much. Like these
it has a lot of pokey bits.
Not like this.
Yeah, I agree. Those pokey bits are too thick.
If you look at the end of the top piece of hair that comes out furthest to the left, it's got a little swoop where it goes down and then to the left, which looks a lot like the way they designed the tabards on the Namarti, which is intentionally designed to look like they're moving underwater.
Sure.
And usually Games Workshop does a pretty good job of making sure that all the hair or cloaks or pieces flow in the same direction, like there's wind going. And that sort of stands out as not really doing that.
That's a good call.
Nope. The other option here is, like, we have seen twin models before, by the by. Like, it wouldn't be the first time, right? That is to say, that used to be the twins who rode the
the dragon. Force dragon.
Yeah.
This is the Twilight.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So
I used to run them.
Sure, there was a cool idea, right? Of like the two elves, these twins who fought on top of this monster. I don't think this is Tyrion and Teclis unless they got some really fabulous hair. Like Teclis, I don't know, maybe they have gone pure 80s and they're just like, they're gonna roll out to some White Lion and just really take it up a notch. But
imagine like a sword dancer unit that's like two elves hooked at like the forearm bracer.
Sure.
Dancing around with like great swords.
Absolutely.
You badass.
Yeah, sure. And there's no reason that can't be a thing now. Like, we've already seen models
like a duet or something.
Yeah. Like different, very unusual models on very unusual bases. Like, we're clearly expanding what the definition is now as we're designing new models for AOS. I think about things like, this is a simple example, but think about like the Alliance with our Stormcast thing. Think about like the Raptors, the long strikes or whatever.
Yep.
Which are like
on different base sizes.
A single dude on like a giant cavalry base because he's got some huge crossbow thing, right? So like we've already been pushing and playing.
And the unit has a diversity of base sizes. Like there's not a single base size for them because the captain is on a stand-up base where the other ones are all on long bases.
Right.
That's right. Yep.
And then all the Hurricanes are on normal shaped bases.
I will say that it bothers me at some fundamental level when I put them on the table and they don't all have the same bases, but it's a thing.
But then you can make a dick shape.
Elevating the show, as I would expect. All right. So
I'm going to comment the fact that there's actually two oblong in one circle. That's not how you make a dick.
That's how you make friends.
All right, so yes, I'm gonna say some kind of twins. I'll buy it for any of that stuff, frankly. Sure. So there you go.
Yeah,
twin elves.
That'd be fun. And then Ideneth, it's all Ideneth all the time right now.
I would have thought you'd be excited by this, Tom, when you started seeing these rules break. But I imagine you're so out of it. Tom was on vacation this week.
I was traveling for business, but what I will say is
he's got the post-traveling blues, the post-vacation blues.
Put me in, coach. I'm in.
It's so funny. Everybody and their sister or brother are making Ideneth armies, and there's just something about it that doesn't do it for me, and I don't know what it is. Like, you would think that like this is my release, like KO was last year.
No, I would think it's exactly like KO, Tom, because I'll go back to the videotape of the KO release when we were seeing the initial models and the initial rules.
And I'm like, nah.
I don't know, man. It's not really hitting for me. I'm not seeing it. And then like 2 weeks after the book and everything was out, you're like, I'm all in, man. This is the greatest thing ever.
I was all in. I was all in before the book dropped. Because I was. But it's because the kind of the lightning struck concept wise with the Fire Slayer stuff. The problem is when I look at this, there's no lightning striking. The thing that would be most compelling if I were to do
I hope not. They're underwater. That's very dangerous.
I know, it'd be pretty scary. It causes a sphere instead of a line. No, there's a D&D joke for you. But
it doesn't.
I'm shocked.
Those sub references don't work if you explain them. People have to catch them.
Yes.
Going.
Anyways, I could see a fun theme army. Like I've made the joke obviously about the like KO joint team thing with like under the sea yellow submarine idea. The other one that I think could actually work potentially competitively, like probably not competitively, but it would be fun to play, is to do an Ideneth Scourge Privateers. And so you have both, your board is like an undersea scene with a big old boat on the top, and then you have both your pirates on the top of the sea, and then a bunch of Ideneth below. Yeah. So that's like the thematic thing that's interesting to me, but it's not enough for me to build an entire army and board out of it.
Right. All right. So, no, that's fine. I just thought like we'll see how you resolve, how steely you say. But we've been rolling out some rules. You're right. So quick hot take. Obviously, we're not gonna dig into all the different rules releases. They're all out there. They're all on the community page. Yeah. Everybody can go look.
And
let
me be clear. There it is. Let me be clear. I'm glad they exist. Like I'm glad that everybody's getting into them. I'm glad that like people love them. Cool.
Yeah. Right on. Absolutely.
It's just I don't think it's for me this time,
and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that
for now.
So for now, well, as I said, we'll see how your resolve lasts. I was interested to see today during the game that like the thing that was changed. Like we all know how I roll and how much I hate painting lots of models, and so like the army that was put on the table today was like what 27 figures or something, 29 figures.
Was it all Cav?
No, it was like 20 of the Namarti thralls and like 6 eels and like a Leviathan and 4 characters. So what does that break out to? 31, something like that? Yeah, that sounds about right. So that was it. And I was like, I like what I'm seeing here for 2K. All right.
And they got smashed, like absolutely obliterated. It was disgraceful. Well, I will say this. This is what I said in our group meet earlier today with our like group here in Nashville. I was like, you know how to showcase an army? Make it play Nurgle. That's just the best. The army's gonna look their best playing an army that doesn't die.
Here's what I'll say. I loved that it lost so badly. Do you know why I love that?
Because it shows they're not trying to pull punches. They're just trying to show what it does.
Correct. And that is a very different perception than the world I came up in. Look, I would like, here's how it used to be for me when I started playing in 97 or whatever. A new army or release would happen. The Catachin jungle fighters are here, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay. And the new White Dwarf would feature a battle report with that new.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
And that new battle report, that force would smoke the other force. Oh, yeah. Just like just the drubbing of a lifetime every time. 100% success rate. And it was just the most obviously
super realistic.
Yeah, the most
very
transparent
view.
Marketing ploy ever, right? Of like, these are so good. So I love when I saw that happen today, I was like, all right, I like what you're about. I like the cut of your jib here. You played it straight.
You sold me. I'm gonna go buy some.
Like, so by losing, it made me happier. I was like, all right, I love what I see here.
This I can do. Now, David, does it make you sad knowing that you're gonna go from an army, you're gonna go from Stormcast to an army with a lower model count?
Oh no, sad. No, I don't think that's gonna actually happen. I don't know that that's gonna be the way you win with that army, but I don't know. Haven't seen the book yet.
Sure, we don't know.
Deep striking or deep tiding or whatever it's called. 30.
Let's go with deep tiding.
Deep tiding. 30 thralls probably have some legs on it.
Yeah.
So we'll get into the full book review and do all that. I don't want to, like, you're right. Many things may be possible. We have no idea all the buffs and synergies. But there's one rule that I want to discuss here up top in the news, because it is, to me, the one standout thing. Obviously, we've seen their tide mechanic. We'll discuss that when we do the book. No. It's not that. I don't honestly think that's as big of a deal as people are making it.
Well, like, as an aside, let me say, Vince, we've long talked about the fact that the double from 2 to 3
is the double turn that matters. Yes.
Is the double turn that matters. And the fact that on that double, even if they don't win the double, they can make themselves fight first.
Right. No, I understand.
So they don't need the double. And if they get the double, they are going to smash people off the table.
They didn't smash Nurgle.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very interesting mechanic. I do not think it's as crazy as people are saying, because from the game, moment one of the game, exactly when it happens, right? Yep. If you get surprised by it, it is nobody's fault but your own.
Right.
But
you also know what Smash and Bastion looks like.
I do, and it's fantastic. So, but no, the rule I want to talk about is obviously the shooting rule. Okay? Because that is, to me, actually a big deal. So the units in this army, to just go over this very quickly, the units in this army basically have a rule that like only the closest unit, I'll ignore some of the,
can be targeted.
Yeah, missile weapons can only be used to target an Idoneth Deepkin unit with this battle trait if it is the closest visible enemy unit. Closest visible enemy unit. That's an interesting thing. It has some interesting parallels with, like, what if I don't need to be visible for certain artillery and shooting weapons?
Like Labas, their best case scenario with like an Orc Laba is to not be visible to anything, because you can still always choose your target then.
Right. So it's not do I get to ignore the whole thing? Blah, whatever. Okay. Yeah. So that's a big rule.
Yeah.
Right. Because like, never has bubble wrap been more powerful, right? Than when it's literally
with
your only target.
With an underwater force. It's
exactly
bubble wrap.
They have the best bubbles. All the best bubbles come in the underwater force.
Some people are gonna be really salty about that one when it comes on the table.
If you don't have a book of fish puns with you, or like stuff like that at the table, you failed as an Idoneth Deepkin player.
As an Idoneth general. Yeah, I mean, what I would say is this: like, you're seemingly playing this off as really game breaking.
I'm not. I'm not playing it off as game breaking.
Well,
I'm saying
takes chaff out into the conversation for the shooting phase, because chaff has only been usable in the movement phase to affect your opponent and in the combat phase. And this means that chaff and diversion tactics actually have huge implications for a shooting phase. And some shooting armies, like if you can put something a little bit like a really garbage target closer to that unit of 30 Arcanauts, they're not going to be able to do nearly as big a hit, right? Like, if I can keep my juicy stuff just far enough back.
If they have one set of guns, that is true.
Sure. But the question is, can they just blow through the cheap unit and then get to the good stuff?
Right. I mean, yes. What I would say is this: my mixed order list I took to Acon would not have a problem with these types of rules. Because there's enough guns to thin out units. Like, if you really wanted to punch a hole in one side of the army, you can do that.
Right.
I will say I'm not sure about that, because again, things that stretch out across the line, you can get screwed on side angles, and all sorts of weird situations can occur. I agree with the general point. Chaff has mattered in shooting. It just hasn't mattered as much, right? Because you can only push people back. So, like, you can't, like, given short range guns, they could still be out of the way, blah, 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 blah. But I take your meaning, and I agree with it in principle. It's a very interesting rule to me, because here's why I think it's actually completely interesting to me. It's not for its first order consequences of, like, what it means to an ID player. Okay.
Right. No, it's what it'll do to the larger meta, because people try to compensate for it.
Correct. Because I do think it's a huge, like, knowing an all shooting army, or an army that relies heavily on shooting, let's say. Right. If I'm, like, looking at a meta where I think there's going to be lots of ID, I probably don't want to roll that heavy shooting force. Right, like, because
or you might, and it really hits the mixed list harder, right? Because if I only have one good shooting unit, then I don't get to make priority happen. I can't shoot with my crappy ones first, take out the chaff, and then shoot my important guns.
Sure. So either way, I agree. I'm not trying to prescribe a universal. I'm saying it depresses the value.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay? And so the second order consequences, everybody complains about, or not everybody. Not everybody. Ooh, let me roll that way back. Some people complain about the nature of shooting in AOS and call for, like, generic special rules that protect characters and stuff like this. And I've long said that would be the worst thing in the universe. Like, it would ruin the game, quite literally. You're asking for a rule that would ruin the game. I don't have the time to go into why that's a bad rule, but it is, from a lot of different game design perspectives. It's terrible. But things like this do that job for you. If they depress the value of shooting and there's less shooting in the meta in general, because people don't want to bring it as much because they can hit that rock to their scissors very easily, then you see less of that. And all of a sudden you get you what the outcome you want without the hard rule to stop it. So that was why it was interesting to me.
It's good. It's good design on the meta level.
Yes.
At the same time, it doesn't protect against. I mean, there's a lot of armies that don't rely on shooting at all to blow you off the table from range. So Tzeentch.
Sure.
Tzeentch, but you can write a Sacrament list that can blow you up from a distance. Nagash.
And Nagash by himself.
Yeah. I mean,
sure.
So there are lists. I mean, the lists that are winning all the tournaments, Change Host, is they don't care. I mean, they're going to shoot their horrors at the unit in front. They're going to shoot the horrors at the unit in front anyway. So
that's why the Ideneth player brings a Gryph-hound.
Oh, that's the sweet tech. Anyways, more to come on that, obviously, but that's just I wanted to kind of plant that flag now because it was what immediately occurred to me. It was not like, oh, I think this is game breaking or oh, it's crazy. It was, oh, that's interesting second order consequences that I think that will have in the long run, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, obviously more spoilers are coming for the Deepkin. We had the game today. We had the designer talk today and the background fluff talk. And oh my gosh, there's so much interesting stuff coming and a lot more. And obviously they go on pre-order this next weekend. So the book and everything. We'll do our show on them the week after the book comes out. So there you go. So not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after that will be our first Deepkin show.
I'll say that there, through Age of Sigmar to this point, there hasn't been an army that has gripped me like this army. So really? I am in like 100%, and I'm really excited.
That's awesome. I've seen the same. A lot of people say the same thing, and that's what excites me about an army like this because it is something that just like, yeah, you might not like it, but there are going to be people who are like at a 10 on this, right? And when you get an army that you're a 10 for, that's the hooks right there, man. That's what makes you love it. When you're playing an army, when you're piloting an army that is a 10 for you, that's when you're a happy player. So like you can run around with 6s all day and that's great. That's not a bad thing. It's just like, it's not as motivating. So yeah. Okay. All righty. Back to the news.
Shadespire Warbands coming up this weekend. We have finally our first plastic flesh hound, first plastic flesh hound.
Well,
right?
technically, Corgus Call had one with him.
Yeah, but it's attached to him. This one
kind of
base.
Sure.
And so we have that with the blood guys. Sure.
Whatever.
Those guys in armor.
If you just describe my whole army,
right? If you just say blood guys, it's generically anything corn.
Yeah. Sure.
Skull fellas.
The blood fellas.
Yep.
Yeah. That seems right.
Checks out. And so we have that, and then we have the Stormcast that nobody plays. The Vanguard crossbows.
That's not true. I see lots of Lord Aquilors around. But
I see people painting Lord Aquilors. I don't know that I've ever seen one on the table.
Oh my God. There was like
I have never seen one on the table for play.
Wow. Well, there were 5 or 6 in the CanCon list alone.
Well,
like out of
I didn't see any in Adepticon.
The majority of Stormcast lists at CanCon had a Lord Aquilor in them. How about that statistic?
Interesting.
Well, how well? Never mind. Yeah.
Pretty good. A Stormcast won. So, I mean, it was pretty not one that had that guy in it.
I'd say I didn't see him at Acon. It may have been what tables I was on, and I was pretty low for a while. So I don't know.
So maybe you're making the wrong point.
I'm not sure what point we're making, but whatever.
Yeah.
This is gonna turn the luck around for that chamber. I'm telling you, man. I feel like they're gonna be solid in Shadespire. So here we go. They'll have one game.
They have the longest range weapons in the game.
Yeah. Sure. Hey, there you go.
A bunch of 3 range crossbows.
There you go.
Exciting. Sorry, it's a negative day. There's a new Malign Portent's short story, ID allying with Stormcast, which is kind of funny because they had allied before, but the whole memory thing.
Yeah, it was really cool because there's a really nice moment in the story where like one of the lords, it's the lord who's riding the like seahorse, comes up and he's like, "Oh, hey, Lord, Lightning Bolt, whatever your name is, doesn't matter. Lord Lightning Bolt, we're here to help." And Lord Lightning Bolt's like, who the heck are you? And he's like, and he looks over at the mage that's with him and he's like, what did you do? He gives him that look. And the mage is like, yo, dog, it wasn't me, man. I didn't do this. And the Stormcast, they sort of like realize they have their own little moment of realization that like, oh crap, our reforging is really costing us, right? Like we're forgetting things and losing our memory.
Well, is it that or is it the fact
the
that
ID,
after
like,
the
no.
ID after they leave?
It's specific. That's what they specifically say it isn't.
Yeah.
Right, like that's the story. That's the
like,
in the ID.
bro.
He's like, wasn't me, bro. I didn't do it this time. Like he specifically is like, I'm out, man. Don't look at me. Don't frame me up for this. I didn't do it. He gives the Shaggy defense. It wasn't me. Okay, and so it was just a really interesting story of like how much the Stormcast are losing and them sort of coming to grips with their loss, their own memory, and then them teaming up to go fight dead people, which I thought was cool. It's just a fun little story. It also makes me hopeful that we'll get like a joint battalion in that army as well, like we did with the Doc. I think that would be neat. So
NKO and
Sylvaneth.
Sylvaneth and
I think
Okay.
it's
cool, good. Sounds great to me, man. I don't have a problem with it.
I agree. I'm with you. That'd be super cool.
What's wrong with joint battalions? Like, throw it in there, man.
no,
somebody
yeah,
else
sweet.
other than Stormcast would be nice. Like, a bunch of dwarves that ally together. That
Well,
seems to
Sure, they're the universal ally in order because they're willing to fight with anybody as long as you're willing to fight chaos. Like that's the Storm Bros thing. They've got one goal, right? So there it is. All right.
Okay. New Black Library novel. Yeah, it's obviously, by the way, with that story, we had the new Stormcast artillery potentially.
Yeah.
Like hint that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we had these two things, and they kind of go together. Like we've got the new Black Library novel that potentially has the new Chamber of Stormcast on the cover. Would you like to see the picture?
Sure.
Let's look at the picture, shall we? Because it's a pretty cool picture. All right.
The one with from the Spanish or German cover.
I do not know what language it is, but yes, this one.
German.
Cool.
The article tells you it's German.
I believe you. But yeah, this is a really, I actually think this is a super cool looking Stormcast. Like this guy looks very different. He's much more angular, right? Much lither.
It's a very elfy Stormcast.
It is a very elfy Stormcast. Yes.
Like it makes me wonder if we're going to see like elfy Stormcast before actually like elfy elves.
We've seen two elfy elves. We've got two elfy elves now.
We've seen some dark elves. Let me say that.
Right?
These guys were made by Techless, the guys that are coming out next week.
No, they weren't. They were cast aside by Techless because of their incomplete souls.
Whatever. He still did it. So you can't just.
We all make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Look, just because he left them like an orphan at a fire station, okay? That's not how this works. It's still Techless's. So, but I like the look of this Stormcast a lot. I like the color. I like the angle. I do think they look like elfy Stormcast. Also, we have the new ghost people, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's been rumors of the Night Haunt release, and we've got these little Night Haunt warrior dude looking on.
Isn't that just the Harbinger?
Shrouds.
Yeah.
We have other ghosty people around him. I don't know if this is meant to be the Knight of Shrouds or not. Doesn't look exactly like the Knight of Shrouds. He has a similar-ish helmet, but these guys in general look more like the other dudes who were around the Knight of Shrouds in the original art. Again, who knows? Hard to say for sure. But, different artists can realize these characters differently, right? I mean, but like this guy, this Stormcast back here, this Storm Bro, tell me this dude doesn't have the definite look of a wizard. Like both these guys
or
are
a
pretty
priest.
wizardy.
Yeah. It could be your sacrosanct, or not sacrosanct. What's the other What's the Templar chamber that we haven't opened?
There's a couple of them, but yes, one of them is sacrosanct. That's right. Yeah, the sacrosanct chamber, the one that might have like other types of magic.
Yeah, sacrosanct. The other one, as Martin Orlando pointed out, it could be also the Covenant. The four that we haven't opened are the Covenant, Ruination, Sacrosanct, and Harbinger.
Well, that we
know about.
Thank you. Yeah, that I know about. Like, I mean, they could just like easily reprint that table and be like, "Oh, he thought of 4 more. He's kept them."
Or they
Surprise!
just call them something else.
You're
Right? Like,
so original.
these are all the chambers, but look, there's also the segmentums.
Mhm.
There's like 95 segmentums.
No.
I've got them on double super secret probation. Can you do that? I just did. Right? Like, yeah, I mean, they can just show up. There's no reasonable limit.
This is the world we live in, correct?
Right. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah, I have no idea. So, but I thought that was really cool. And there's the rumor that like the Stormcast are going to get, the current rumor is that they're going to get actual artillery to match to the Lord Ordinator, but also to like like at one of the chambers, that would match with the shoulder pad. We saw that was the Stormcast shoulder with like the anvil and stuff. And that they'll have like some kind of basically traditional-ish artillery weapons, not like medieval necessarily, like a catapult that throws magical
Like something that throws lightning.
Well, actually, the rumor was magical bomb potions, but sure, that's the idea. Something unusual. It ain't gonna be hurling a rock. That's yes. They aren't rolling out the old school, 15th century trebuchets. I wouldn't bank on that one.
But what if they did? What if that was how Bretonnian trebuchets came back into vogue?
I would be so offended.
I think it'd be hilarious.
They just like lightning bolt down and then like start like assembling this thing. Just like
Sigmar just phoning it in. He's like, all right, yeah, y'all got it.
Like, boom, Bretonians are back.
Yeah.
He lightning bolts down the Stormcast, and then they're like, Sigmar, send us a weapon to defeat our enemies. And a big lightning bolt comes down, and it's just a pile of lumber and a rock. And he's like, all right, man, see what you can do, guys.
Really, the Lord Ordinator's not, he's just an engineer who puts together the trebuchets with his 2 hammers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he's twice as fast at assembling it, obviously.
It's fine.
That's why he's got 2 hammers.
Next, we're going to release a character that just holds 2 nails.
Oh my God.
Broke Vince.
Jesus, you almost killed me. All right, so that must be the greatest Stormcast ever. All right, so oh boy, where were we with the news?
Okay. Events. Tyler has put together a fantastic events list for AOS, like GTs, for a US list, and we have something similar over on AOS Shorts as well.
Yeah, so Tyler did the list on AOS Shorts. And last week we talked about the AOS Shorts list. I apologize, Tyler. I didn't credit you. I didn't realize he had assembled the US component of that or had contributed. I think a couple of the people contributed in as well. So I apologize to anybody I'm not crediting here. But I know Tyler wrangled it up. So thank you very much, sir. That's deeply appreciated. I'll throw the link down in the comments again so people can go check it out to go look at all the tournaments they may find. So there you go. Get out there, go to a tournament. It's super fun. A tournament like, say, I don't know, Nash Con. Let's go to our pick of the week section. It's pick of the week time. Right. Breaking news in from the front. All right, so David, what do you got for a pick of the week, man? What would you like to share with everybody? I have a sneaking suspicion, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Nashcon, and I've got my phone here for my notes, so I don't forget to say anything. So Nashcon is going on June 2nd, 3rd, 5-game GT, located in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. We'll be running the General Handbook Battle Plans, all but Scorched Earth. And we'll be using schemes, which if you've watched the show for some time, you'll remember that me and Vince and Tom, mostly Vince and Tom, kind of created these schemes, and then Vince went to do the best at them at Nashcon last year, which is pretty funny.
Peter!
Which actually, since then, I've created a Super Schemer Award. It's got a sweet trophy and everything this year, so it's gonna be pretty cool.
Have those arrived?
They're actually arriving tomorrow. I was really hoping they would arrive tonight and I could show them off on camera. It didn't happen though, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean we're pretty excited about it, and our signups are moving at a pretty good clip. We've got goals of becoming a pretty a staple of the Southeast kind of gaming region. So, I think we're really excited about it. Welcome anybody that wants to make the trip. Yeah.
Can you talk about what maybe makes Nashcon different to other GTs?
So one thing that is really great is that the website is super horrible, and you're going to have to text at least 2 people to confirm that you're able to sign up correctly.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah. Yeah. The website is lacking in some regards. So I would say from the AOS perspective, one thing that makes Nashcon unique, one is schemes that we were just talking about earlier. Schemes are secondary objectives that are hidden. So you start the tournament, you draw 7 cards from a stack at the TO table, and you take those 7, and throughout your 5 games, you use one of those cards. So you'll end up using 5 of your 7, and you'll keep those hidden and use those as your secondary objectives. And they're worth just about as much as a minor victory. So they're very valuable. Another thing that makes Nashcon unique is we're doing the 2-list format. So you come to Nashcon with 2 lists, and you have to play both of them at least once at the tournament.
Have to be same faction?
Have to be same Grand Alliance, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a blind man's bluff, because what will happen is that you'll have your 2 lists, and you'll look at what the 2 lists your opponent can field. And you'll have to figure out which one of your lists you're going to play, with the possibility of knowing what their 2 lists are and what the scenario is.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty well received last year. I think
it is a fantastic format.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. And to Jacob's point, if anyone's listening and thinking about signing up, choose the tournament pass, which is the $50 option, and then type in Age of Sigmar into the blank. That's how you get effectively registered.
Yeah, the challenge here is obviously Nashcon. It's part of like the Age of Sigmar tournament is happening as part of a larger convention at this hotel. And so there are other events also going on, and their website was designed apparently on GeoCities. Like
it's an old conference, and the website maps.
Yeah, it was largely historicals. And yeah,
and it's appropriate that the website's quite historical, 90s in fact.
Yeah, but they're good people. So it's just,
yeah, I mean, venue-wise, it's a super nice location. It's in a very easy to reach place. It was great. It was great last year. I'm super looking forward to it again.
Have you secured the hotel room you had last year?
Oh man, I do need to call and make sure we get that same room. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because like that exact same room. All right, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I will say that the hotel is in a pretty good location. It's a pretty nice area. There's a lot of places to eat and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, pretty cool.
There you go. Rock and roll.
Love to have you.
It's actually country, but yeah, close.
All right. So, Jacob, what's your pick of the week, man? What would you like to share with everybody out there?
Yeah, well, in 3 days, it will be Saturday, and the NBA playoffs are starting. And my Golden State Warriors are going back to defend their title against a slew of much better Western Conference teams and some vastly improved Eastern Conference teams.
So what?
You just lost 2/3 of the audience.
I think you're vastly overestimating how many are left.
All right, very good. Anything wargaming related?
Sure, yeah. So I just I guess a week and change ago, I booked a flight for myself and my wife, along with some other friends who also booked their flights out to Manchester, England, for I want to say September 19th, which is the Wednesday preceding the Facehammer GT.
Nice.
David and his wife are flying out. I know Joseph Urban from the West Coast group and his wife Lydia are flying out. So we're going to go and do Facehammer GT. And now that the internet has heard me say this, it counts as my sign up because they haven't gone live with their tickets yet. So I count as signed up. My spot now.
So this is like American dibs.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Yeah. It was a great conversation with me and my wife. We were sitting at dinner, and I got a text from Jacob, or I think maybe in the group me, and he was like, "Hey, just we're going to Facehammer. Y'all should come." And I looked up at my wife, and I was like, Jacob's going to Fate, going to England and playing a Warhammer tournament. And she looked at me, she goes, well, why aren't we going? And I was like, whoa, all right, we're signing up.
What's funny about that is the exact same thing happened when Joseph told me he was going. He messaged me going, I'm going to Facehammer. I go, that's cool. Turn him off and go, that's awesome. Joe's going to Facehammer. She goes, where's that? I go, oh, it's in England. She goes, where are we going?
Well, look, you can, as I've recently learned myself, you can get away with that once because then it's a vacation. You're taking your spouse over there. You try that into year 4. We're gonna see how well that story works. That's all I'm saying. But
I got it to work when we were dating, and we went to Prague for the ETC, the last ETC of 8th Ed.
There you go.
Wow.
All right.
I can keep swinging this. She likes vacations and drinking abroad. I mean, she likes drinking domestically also, but like
sure. No, only international drinking. That's it. Very specific. All right. No, that's awesome, man. That sounds super, super fun. I look forward to cheering on all of our American competitors there.
Yep,
then I expect you.
Our Rolling Stones are better than their Beatles.
I mean, that's plainly not true, but that's okay. We'll move on past that. The Tommy, what do you got to share, man?
Yeah, so I would have shared this last week, but I was not around. I was traveling. But I want to promote
3. That's 3, Tom.
3 what?
You're down 3 now. You're down 3 now. There's 3 shows you've missed. So now that's going to push back your anniversary even farther.
You're ridiculous.
Keep going.
So the Age of Sigmar championships. So this was it's a video on YouTube from Heywo Twitch, and he is reflecting on his first Adepticon experience, which was this year. In this reflection, he was a competitive Magic the Gathering player. And so he's approaching Adepticon and AOS from a competitive Magic standpoint and talking about his experiences of the community, talking about his experiences of the con itself, talking about his experiences of the competitive character of the tournament. And it's a really great watch. I would encourage you all to watch it. And it's Tyler Emerson actually put me onto it, and I'm super thankful for it. It's very revealing as to, I think his critiques are legitimate, or many of them are legitimate. And I think not like that, Jacob. And I think that and what came out to me, what I realized is just how amazing of a community we have. And you can hear that in his discussion of just how uncharacteristically awesome our community is amongst the gaming communities.
What's his human name?
I don't know.
No.
Look, once you, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Heywo. Look, this is like the Matrix. Like once you decide on your name, like that's it. You're Neo. You're not whatever this stupid.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what his real name was.
Parzival. That's just his name.
Yeah. You choose your name. Yeah. Heywo is in the stream right now. So there you go.
Oh, nice.
Rock on. I would like to, for my pick of the week, I would like to share a recent
Joseph. His name is Joseph.
Thank you.
Well, there you go.
I didn't stab you. I said you were awesome.
No, he's saying he put his real name out there, so he was saying in response, also please don't stalk and stab me, which is I feel
no promises.
Fair.
No promises.
That is appropriate. That's definitely appropriate.
So wouldn't it be great if I wasn't using my real name this whole time? If I had like if I had been seemingly using my real name and I was actually just a completely different person, wouldn't that be an amazing twist? But no,
it's not.
It's not. No, this is my real name.
You have a very comic book-esque name, but no,
sure.
you do.
All right, so I would like to point everybody towards a recent lore video from our buddy 2+ Tough, who did an awesome lore video on the Wa, which was super cool. I've always loved the concept of the Wa and of Dorky Wa and dorks in general, the way that they fight. So it's a very cool little exploration of sort of the history of Dawa. So check it out. You'll like it. If you like the greenskins. So I'll link that down in the show notes. Okay. So let's turn to some hobby time, gentlemen. As I've heard you all clipping and banging on crap this whole show, I know you're working on stuff.
Nothing. Sorry.
So, David, what are you working on, buddy?
Ooh, I'm working on a lot of things. So I bought off Brad Schwant, Relian. I bought off him a large amount of GW scenery. And then so I've been building that in preparation for Nash Con. Jacob's helping me with that. And then I have some other odds and ends that I've actually purchased at Nash Con last year. I posted these on Twitter before, but these would be really cool, like resin church models. So I'm getting those going and basically doing tons of terrain kind of all over my game room. And then I'm also kind of piecing together some elfish wizards to use in the Ivaneth.
Nice.
So that's
Rock and roll. I'm excited. That's a lot of stuff. That's a full table. That's a full table. Jacob, what about yourself, man? What have you been clicky clacking on this whole damn time?
Yeah, I've been taking all the heraldry off of Judicators so that I can give them Zangor heads and Skyfire bows and make them all Zinchi. Because the project I've been working on for what feels like forever, it's probably only been a couple months actually, is a dual army Zinch and Stormcast. So ideally I can play every model in both armies. Double the effort, just as much like money and time as two armies, and maybe half of the actual utility.
Well, it sounds like you're making a wise investment as always. So no, that's great. That's cool. I dig it. All right. So Tom, you're back. What are you working on now?
Nothing.
What are you going to be working on?
I don't know. My work on my board. I have a bunch of daughters kind of clipped and glued and stuff. Might prime them. I don't know. We'll see.
Tin hat moment for a second. Dragon Scorn, Thunder Scorn, Dragon Ogres are going to do double damage against Ideneth. There
you go. I feel like the only possible move for you at this point is to get them Dragon Ogres out and start going to town. Yep, it checks out.
And it's the only army with a lower model count.
There you go. That's a good. These are both good points. I think you're really winning him over. I can see it.
No, like I did have I talked about my Stormcast in space?
You did mention that you finished your Stormcast in space.
Yeah, what I found is that like I was painting them and I just wasn't even motivated to do any highlighting. And like it was the type of thing where I'm like, I painted them and I'm just like, pretty done here. And so like I'm afraid to start a real project because I don't know if like I just I pushed so hard on my last project that I'm just I'm on like that burnout stage or something. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, the best way to figure that out is just to hobby. Like to just do anything that is going to be, you start and then you see where you go with it. And you don't beat yourself up if you don't go to a certain level you're pre-holding yourself to. You push yourself to where you are having fun with it and you make something that you love.
Yeah, but I wasn't. That's the problem.
I would say this about Stormcast too. Stormcast, like when you put those highlights on them, just turns them to a whole different model. Like that's what I found with mine. Like I did them to base coats and I was to layers, and I just looked at them and I was like, ugh. And then I line highlighted them and I was like, oh, I like these. It just makes all the difference. Makes you appreciate the models a lot more.
Sure.
It helps when your line highlights look the way yours do.
Well, thank you. Bad.
Just like gray slate, maybe still plastic.
Did you paint these?
The non-plastic plastic effect.
It's exactly. Yeah. I tried to recapture the perfect plastic sheen.
Left the sprue bits on and everything.
Yeah. So for myself, I do not suffer from any of Tom's ennui here. I have been in the thick of it. So obviously I've worked on a bunch of the daughters. I got, what else did I finish on top of what I was doing? There's something else. Oh, finish my first group of snakes. That's what it was. So I'm about 1,400 points into my daughters, finished my first group of snakes. I've got some little canaries primed back there. There they are, just sitting there waiting. They were assembled and put together. But at the moment, I am working on these boys right here.
Boys, I get it.
The boys. Not only because they can join in my Iron Jaws army, which is nice, but also because they are going to be my Golden Demon entry for unit, because you can do Shadespire crews, and I really like these guys. There's him. He's my work in. Oh, these are all very, very work in progress. The boss is in his little sub assemblies and stuff. And so when I go over to Warhammer Fest, see, I still have it in its little baggie, my little ticket. They said they send you the ticket, which I did not expect. I thought I would just like show up and it'd be a will call situation, but no, they send you the ticket. On top of that, I've been playing around with this stuff. So this is these are come out of there. Oh well, I'll just put my hand on here so it doesn't all fall out. There you go. Oh, it's upside down. These are designer gouache. They're watercolor paints. They're artists' watercolor paints, and they're very interesting. And you can blend really smoothly and easily with them. But if you get water on them later, it all runs and reactivates. So it's it's a real interesting medium to work in. Let me just say that. And I just started like mixing them with acrylic paints and just say, hey, let's see what happens here. Let's just throw some paint around and see what happens on a potential Golden Demon entry. So now's the time to experiment. Go nuts. So yeah, it's been pretty busy.
Is the strategy with that just every layer you hit it with a matte varnish after?
Yeah, exactly. That's one thing you can do. Yes, if you just varnish over it, I mean, then it's locked, right? You'll seal the pigments in.
Yeah.
You can also. It's. I mean, it's. I don't know. Like you just don't pay attention to what you're doing and you're fine.
Just don't mess up.
Just don't mess up. Yeah. Don't screw up. I don't know what else to tell you. So like, but it's really interesting for doing like broad flat blends. It's also like hyper matte, that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is no sheen whatsoever. It is dead matte. So it's actually a really interesting sort of thing that happens with it. So there you go.
Quick question: are you planning on bringing those daughters to Nashcon?
Yeah, I don't know yet, man. I'm not sure. That's a great question. And
no, you're gonna bring your Iron Jaws.
No, bring the daughters. I want to see it. Because I would make this prediction. I think you get a top 3 finish if you do your daughters.
That's a bold prediction.
No, because I saw you last year where you you lowballed everybody saying you're gonna do terrible, and you sat on table 1 for like 3 rounds.
I would like to probably I don't know. I'm sure I could have enough done by then, but that is an honest.
Or he brings his 1-drop Iron Jaws and steamrolls people.
It's also a strong possibility, sure. But at any rate, the question was asked in the comments of surprised I wasn't doing the Skaven Shadespire crew. Tom, why am I doing the orcs?
Because Vince said to me, okay, without thinking, respond either orcs or Skaven. And I went, orcs. He was like, okay, that's what I'm doing.
And then I immediately sent the email that said, send me the orcs. That was it. Like, that was, boom. Tom was my coin flip.
It's my fault.
I gave him no context. I didn't explain. I just said, I said, I'm not going to give you any context. Just give me an answer. Orcs or Skaven. He said orcs. So.
And I went, orcs. That sounds good.
There it is.
You picked wrong.
Oh, I don't think so.
I think it was a better choice.
Orcs.
Day orcs. Okay. So let's move to some feature segment an hour into this, as usual. And let's talk about some Storm Bros. So I wanted to talk about the Stormcast because 1, it had been a long time since we've talked about them. 2, they are the ostensibly flagship of Age of Sigmar. They are the flagship, emblematic, iconic imagery and characters and heroes of the story. Okay. And I mean, the freaking statue is out front of the building, right? Like they took down the Space Marine and put up a Stormcast. That's a pretty bold statement. And 4, we're likely to get a new chamber. 5, they've managed to remain, I would argue, opening statement, very competitive over their lifespan, in lots of different ways and with a myriad number of lists. Now, there have always been some crutches in there that have done better than others, but I would argue that they have always remained at least competitive. Okay? Which to me is a fascinating thing. But what I want to touch on first, and I want your general opinion on this, okay? I want to go to the group. We're going to go around on this. Here is my argument. Stormcast, here's my perhaps unpopular opinion, are the most successful introduction of a new iconic whatever race, army, whatever you want to say, type thing into a game with a deep existing canon ever. And what I mean by that is that whatever you personally think of Stormcast, whether you love them or hate them, they have a huge amount of players who show up and play them. They're very easy for new people to collect. And they have instantly become a pretty attached and indelible part of the Age of Sigmar. And when you try to introduce a new iconic, go ask Wizards of the Coast about trying to introduce new races to the D&D world and how well that worked out in general. Like, they threw spaghetti at the wall and had maybe like one hit out of everything.
Cool, man.
Tieflings have been around forever. Tieflings weren't new.
No, but like the dragon.
Right. I'll give you maybe Dragonborn. Exactly. That would be the only one. But like the number of dead races where they tried to introduce new iconics, where they, as a stated goal in the book, tried to introduce new iconic villains and heroes, and none of them got traction.
Nope.
Yeah. None of them got traction.
Yeah.
Okay.
True.
There is go back to Magic and ask them about getting rid of merfolk and introducing homerids and how well that worked out for them. Okay. Like, lots of times this got tried, and pretty much every time the fan base rejected it almost wholesale. Right. But something about Stormcast hit. Sure. Now, like, again, there are plenty of people who hate Stormcast. Yeah, great. I hate Space Marines. That doesn't make Space Marines not exceedingly popular. Right? Whatever the case of people who hate them, they seem to have a huge amount of people who love them. And they seem to have actually been very successful and an incredibly successful bold move. That's my perhaps unpopular opinion. All right, gentlemen, what do you think? I mean, Dave, you decided to pick these guys up and pilot them. What motivated you to do it?
Well, it seems like you're going more lore focused in this regard, right? Or are you saying gameplay?
Across the board. They couldn't, if it was only one element that hit, they would have failed. Right? Yeah. An army with great lore and terrible models and terrible rules probably isn't hitting.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say they were introduced not kind of as I think part of what helped them is they weren't introduced to they weren't completely new in that they represent the souls of people that were, right? So if you liked free people, you could imagine that your free people became these Stormcast, right? So it's not too far of a jump. So it's not like introducing this crazy new race that had no relation to anything else before it.
Well, at the same time, aesthetically, David, let me build on that, though. Aesthetically, they're not really new either. They're a combination of Chaos Warriors, from fantasy, which was always very popular, merged with Space Marines. Like, I know this is going to be contentious, but like they already had a gold mine, and they're like, "Hey, let's make that gold mine gold," and they did.
No, I think you're right because yes, Space Marines were based on Chaos Warriors.
Right.
That's what Chaos Warriors were how GW made all of their money in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, this is not a new formula. The new formula is they became good guys.
Sure.
Yeah. So what I would say, and then what got me into the race specifically, or into the army specifically, is that I played a couple armies that went the compendium route, right? And I got frustrated at times that my models became kind of invalidated to some degree, or got priced to a point where they're no longer playable really competitively. And I looked at Stormcast and I was like, these guys are never going away. And they should always probably be competitive as the flagship army. And when you play them, they just kind of work. They do what they're supposed to do. Stormcasts they're in that way, they're very reliable. And I kind of found a couple lists that I thought would be fun to play and just ran with it. So I guess that's kind of that was what got me into the army.
Sure. And though I do agree with you, Tom, like they are sort of a combination of elements. I don't disagree with that point. That still doesn't always work, right? Like you can,
sure,
you can certainly.
It is still a miraculous shift. Let me say that.
Yeah.
But that said, I don't think that it's as risky of a bet as someone might suggest.
Yeah, I mean, they were certainly an interesting. They went all in on these. Like, let's not, mince words here, right?
They courageously made that decision.
Yeah. Like they've released these more. Every time they release more, they're going to release more soon, very likely, and they're going to hear the same crap again from people who hate them. And I imagine they drink in those tears and love it because they know that there's a whole silent majority who are buying them. Like they're looking at those sales numbers and going, "Yeah, okay,
yeah,
you can write your angry post on Facebook all you want. These sales numbers don't lie."
Yeah,
right.
Okay,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's true.
I wonder if their success didn't come with the success of AOS as a more inclusive game than 8th edition, than Warhammer Fantasy Battles became. Because the biggest problem with Fantasy Battles was that people couldn't really get into the game without a huge buy-in, a monetary buy-in and a time buy-in.
sure.
And arguably a skill buy-in, because you couldn't go and play in communities without having put in all that effort on the front end.
Right. Sure.
And AOS does a much better job of being inclusive. To your point earlier about Stormcast being easy for beginners to pick up and build and paint and play. It's not easy to succeed and do well at high levels with them, but it's very feasible to do, which you can't say about some other armies.
Well, I mean, GW subsidized it, to get your point, Jacob. GW subsidized their popularity as well. And what I mean by that is there is no other army where you can own the entire, everything in huge numbers fairly affordably compared to the other armies. Like I think about KO, I dropped a lot of money, and if I want to do something similar for Stormcast, I'd end up spending half the cost just by picking up starters and picking up all the bundles and everything else that's out there.
Sure. No, that's a fair point. They've always kept the price on many of the Stormcast deals, suppressed comparatively, right? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
No argument there.
And from a painting perspective, I mean, to get Stormcast to a tabletop standard is fairly simple, which is great for beginners.
Yep. Yeah.
I think it ties to the success of the game as a much more casual and accessible game than 8th Ed was. Probably more so even than 40K, which was at the time the simpler version of the two games.
Sure. It's also interesting because they became the new baseline, right? Like if you think about the Liberator or many of the Stormcast things, they became the sort of baseline upon which other units get balanced, right? Like many times when talking about the balance of a unit, we balance them against Liberators, right? Which are just sort of like this. They're a great example of a battle line unit that does its job pretty well, right? And it becomes like this thing that you can put a comparison against.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised in the design and development discussions if Liberators are the litmus test. They are the kind of the staple power level that points, point to power ratio is being compared against.
Yeah. Right. Liberators and Judicators. Those are the two. Yeah.
What about Judicators? Judicators to me are Liberators to me are very even. They're net neutral. I think of Judicators as being much higher net positive.
Well, yeah, they're more expensive. I mean,
but
as a ranged troop in sort of a melee anvil defensive troop, right?
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yes. So okay, fair enough. Now I wanted to talk about their sort of performance overall in the meta. My argument is that to this point, partially because of the size of their range and the variability of it, right? And they have, I mean, they simply have more options than most any other army, not all, but most. Certainly, like there are forces within Chaos that can muster similar sort of madness. But they have a very wide range and have remained highly competitive throughout their life cycle, despite the fact that their book is now, pretty old, really. It was, a relaunch after the reset of the GHB's expectations and the new rules and spells.
Months, going on 14 months old.
Sure. It's hilarious to me that that's an old book in our terms. Like, no. I was playing with the Skaven book until 2014, and that was published in like 2006. But at any rate, nonetheless, that counts as an old book now. Oh, what a dreamland we live in now. What halcyon days. But nonetheless, they have like through a lot of new books and releases. They've still remained, you see them all the time, and you see them being fairly competitive. They're usually, if you go walk up and down the top tables during most rounds of a tournament, you're probably going to see a Stormcast army or two in that area, right? Now, whether or not they're necessarily taking home gold, we mentioned CanCon, which they won earlier, but they show up, they represent.
Vanguard Wing will do that for you.
Yeah.
Well, and before that, they had another shenanigan.
Thunderstrike Brotherhood.
Thunderstrike, but I mean, again, that like the reason the example I quoted didn't rely on any of that. It was just a good balanced Stormcast list. The Nashcon winner from last year.
Yeah.
Right. Wasn't a ridiculous, skew battalion. It was just a rock solid, well built, well balanced.
That's not true. He was running 1-drop Hollowed Knights.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, it was a 1-drop Hollowed Knights list.
Yeah.
Like it was still 1-drop.
I understand it was a battalion that was 1-drop. Okay. Are you trying to allege that it was a Vanguard Wing or Thunderstrike skew?
No, but it had the benefits of other 1-drops. That doesn't exist in the Stormcast world right now.
Yeah.
I don't disagree that it didn't have that 1-drop thing going for it. But when you look at the construction of that army, it was like 3 groups of Liberators, 4 Fulmies, like it was a pretty across the board balanced Stormcast list.
Yep.
Yeah. By most standards. Yeah. Yep. By most standards, it was a very balanced list. And that if you looked at it kind of from just standing off of it, you look at it and be like, how's he doing so well with this? But there's a lot of pieces to it, gadget pieces that really made it super effective.
Yep.
Yeah. So, that's just it. So I want to dig in.
Matt plays an excellent game as well. To Matt's credit,
he is a great player. Absolutely. Yeah. No doubt about that. But so that's what I wanted to dig into. And Tom, I want your opinion on this because certainly I think maybe because I know you've thought a fair amount about this. Why have they remained competitive? It can't just be the number of units. There has to be more to it than that, because there are other armies that have pretty large ranges or capabilities to have large ranges, and yet they don't remain as competitive. Is it the combination of everything, like the prayers they have, the abilities they have, the synergies they have? What is it, do you think?
If I were to weigh in, I think that it's a combination of a couple things. They can run the equivalent of a mixed order list in faction. And what I mean by that is that the range is truly diverse enough that you can get some strong shooting, some strong anvils, some strong punchy monsters. You can get a mix of units, but stay in faction so that you're not breaking allegiance. So you get all the extra toys, you get all the prayers, you get all the special super items. I will say that stuff like Mirror Shield and the Tempest Lantern or whatever, those things are doing some work on the competitive scene.
Sure.
They just are. They're great kind of anti-meta. What I would say is that, and there's just some really good units in there, some really good simple synergies that make things really punchy, whether you're trying to stack for mortals out of Retributors with bonuses to hit, or whether you're trying to you have a trumpet behind a unit of fulminator so that they can punch, retreat, and punch again. Like there's just a lot of just simple combos that are just really effective for Stormcast. What I would say is on top of all that, they also have the best of all possible worlds, because in addition to they themselves being able to field a mixed strong list, so it's not really necessarily skew at all. Because like normally when you have a Swiss Army knife, you pay the price of that utility because you lose all the special benefits. They don't lose any of that because they have mixed into their mix of units that utility. The other element that they bring is that any utility they don't have, I'm thinking particularly like magic, they can ally anything in from order.
Right.
They can pick and choose all of the best and stay in allegiance. And I think that is really what's keeping Stormcast afloat. It's a combination of all those factors. And I mean, their units are generally more durable than most on the other armies on the just on the numbers. Sure. They can get hyper durable if they need to, if they stack all the, the stalwart, staunch defender and all the castellan, all the bonuses and stuff like that. So it's a combination of a lot of those factors, a lot of units with just a flat 3+ armor, not a lot of armies have that across the board. And so even like their kind of throwaway anvil 100-point units, liberators, are fairly hard if they're standing on terrain. There's 3 up reroll 1s with 10 wounds. Like there's not a lot of armies that are going to be pulling that.
Yeah, and I would say kind of what my revelation, because having played them the relatively short amount of time that I've played them, but all the units have a role that they do well.
Yes.
Like, you put Judicators on the table and you know what they're going to do, and they're going to typically perform well because their stat line would let them do that. Fulminators do what they do well, right? And so you have a bunch of very reliable units that you can kind of by themselves have a job that you can expect for them to do, which is nice in an army. In a competitive list, you want to diminish the risk that you have in most spaces of the game.
And what that starter rate is going to do when it hits the table. And it's going to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Typically. Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in defining, like we've talked before about, what makes an army good, right? And Tom, you've kind of listed some of the criteria that you have, like, they have some element of mobility as defined in a lot of different ways, right? The ability to be where you need to, power projection, right? Yep. So the ability to project your power where you need to onto the battlefield, durability, right? The ability to sit there and withstand and hold points and so on and so forth.
Yep. And they have all of that in spades.
Sure. And it's not that they don't have weaknesses. Certainly they do, right. As has already been pointed out in the comments. They're generally pretty scant on like mortal wound protection, right? Stuff like that. So there are certainly things that can take them out.
Indeed.
Like a unit of Retributors sort of worst nightmare is sort of just like mass cheap troops that get buffed up and are somehow hitting and wounding on like 3s and 3s or something with even no rend. It doesn't like just getting hit by large numbers where they can't swing fast enough to kill them, right? And they get drugged down by. Well, or it doesn't even have to be that expensive, but yeah, sure. You know what I mean? Yes, something like that is just a nightmare.
Well, that's 270 points, and that block is going to throw out 100 and 120 attacks. 120
attacks if they get all of them in. Yeah, like that's sort of a nightmare for them because they'll probably end up evaporating most of that unit, but they will get evaporated too, right? Those 10 Retributors,
and that's a good trade. I'll trade 270 for 440.
Absolutely. Also, the power of the piece, right? Like you needed that to do something else. So it's actually quite interesting, the limitations. But what I was thinking about with them was, and let me ask you this question. Do they have, one of the other elements we haven't talked about before, in my mind, is power pairs. I was thinking a lot about this, okay? And I think armies that do well have, I'll colloquially call them power pairs.
Absolutely.
Like 2 units that synergize well together. Can be a hero and a unit is often the most simple way this works, but it's not always the case, right? But power pairs where you need 2, maybe sometimes 3 units, but that can go march off and be very efficient at what they do. And so you can take your whole army, and if you have an army that you can generate like 4 power pairs out of, right, where you can get 4 different groups, and synergistically they all punch above their weight, then you have a very effective force, right? Because Death Stars.
I can't imagine somebody building a force like that.
Sure. So
I say this for those that you don't know flippantly, like that was what my entire Acon list was built around. Was a bunch of power pairs.
Your Rune Smiter and your Volkites and your
the Rune Lord and the Longbeards and then the KO and the 2 chemists.
Yeah, we've talked about this sort of amongst the 2 of us before, but I don't know that we ever talked about it. And as I was thinking about Stormcast, it occurred to me that they have a lot of good power pair combinations, right? Especially between their heroes. Like you just mentioned a couple of them, right? When you talked about like
like your Heraldor and your Fulminators, or your Castellan and backing anybody.
Exactly.
Castellan and the Stormcast.
Well, Castellan and an appropriate unit that's actually tough enough to start healing off the Lantern and get to a 1-up. Like that's a super anvil.
Yep.
The Lantern Boy and the appropriate shooters, right? Who can he can, these little power pairs that the tiny synergies where you don't need to invest your whole force because Death Stars lose, right? Yeah. Big synergies lose because if you need 8 components to make your army work, you're going to lose 3 of those components, right? Yeah. But an army that's got power pairs can survive and withstand and still have other things to do. I think they have some of the best. That's what occurred to me. I don't know. Dave, Jacob, what do you think about this? What do you think about this concept? This totally imaginary thing that I just threw out there.
Well, you add on to that idea that you don't have to have a 1-to-1 ratio. You can have 3 characters that synergize super well with 4 or 5 different units, and depending on what roles you're putting them in, you can go off and just run rampant on stuff. You can throw blessed weapons on Judicators, and suddenly you're generating extra attacks. If they took a damn terrain, suddenly they're getting extra attacks on 5s or something. Same time, you could do blessed weapons on your Paladors, who are getting mortal wounds on the Griff Charger attacks and also generating extra attacks with that.
Nobody would do that, Jacob.
I'm 100% certain you're right. I can't imagine doing that. Why would anyone want extra attacks that also come from the mortal wounds they generate?
No.
I take your meaning.
Paladors have to be in the army.
That's really the only downside if you think about it. But
hey now, whoa! I love they were like my shining star all weekend.
I have run the numbers so many times trying to make them work in a list.
We're not trying.
Because I want because like hear me out. I want non-standard lists to work, and so I always try those skew corner things to try to like figure out how to make it like just squeeze the orange juice out of it. And I'll
tell you what, the reasons I lost my games were not because of my 6 Paladors. They were the most overperforming unit I had in my list all weekend.
I'm thinking about running 2 6-packs of them with an Aqualore.
That's too much.
Make it happen.
Too much.
Nope.
Steer into this bad decision.
I don't know. Like, so
but no, I agree with you.
Hold on, you're telling me you'd rather have that than like a 10 Retributors and you're almost at the point of 10 like 2 packs of 6 instead of 10 Retributors and 4 Fulminators because you're about the same points.
So I would say I would take 6 Paladors or 10 Retributors every time because you can go and get objectives. Retributors are so freaking slow and so easy to beat. Like I can beat Retributors every time I put them. Every time I see Retributors on the table, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be easy. I'll just tag them and let them slowly work their way over with those big old hammers because they're 4 movement apiece.
But that's
Paladors
fine.
Are like everywhere on the table.
Yeah, you have a mobile unit and a slow unit, and that's why I said that I can contrast them with Fulminators. Yeah, because like Fulminators. Again, let's just talk about 6 Paladors versus 4 Fulminators. Really?
I just like them better. I haven't. This is me not having played a single game with Stormcast, but having built a bunch of lists.
That's fine. That's fine. Yep.
So yeah, I mean,
also why not have both?
To the notion of power pairs, I think I may have. So my Death Army, well, the one that I liked before it got nuked. It revolved around the same notion of power pairs, specifically, and this is still one that's I think is one of the best. Is the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon and Blood Knights. They are units that together will outpunch their weight almost all the time due to their synergy with the command ability and all that stuff. And so, but to your point, like 2 units that can run around the table together, those are like they're made for each other in that regard. Mm-hmm. And that it's the same notion. And I think I agree with that. But I found even unsupported Stormcast can do well. So if you put, even without using those little synergies, but it's also why you see Stormcast armies are so hero heavy. Like you're in a typical Stormcast list, you're going to spend a sizable chunk of your list is going to be on those heroes because you want them for those little gadget pieces that you can do with them, like the Heraldor and the Castle and all of those.
So
I don't disagree.
So let's talk about it's an interesting concept, and I agree. I think that Death is actually one of the other examples of an army that has a lot of interesting little power pairs where some are more hard coded, which I think, Jacob, your point is very well taken. A lot of them aren't hard coded, right? And that's another Stormcast advantage. It doesn't have to be like A plus B only.
Yeah.
It can be A plus B or C or D, and all are going to be effective and efficient.
When you put A, B, C all together with something else, then you just
so they can collapse into a Death Star if they need to, but they don't have to operate that way. Sure. Okay. So let's talk about some standouts that have retained their value, right? That we think still at this time. And the comments have lit up already with some hard thoughts on Fulmies and retros, by the way, and people who are saying they aren't worth it anymore. So we've got some contention. But let's talk about some of what we think are the standouts, or maybe some of the ones that aren't as good as they're perceived. And where I want to start on is I want to start on something that already got mentioned. I want to start on Mr. Stardrake. Okay. Now, here's the appropriate thing that I want to talk about right off the rip. When I said Mr. Stardrake, what was in your mind specifically?
Lord Celestant on Stardrake.
Right.
Yeah, but with Mirror Shield and Staunch Defender.
Yeah.
Sure. That's all fine. Okay, super great. But
what you're putting your finger on is there are actually other Stardrakes that people don't run.
That no one would even think of. Like, nobody was confused.
No, Mirror Shield and Staunch Defender are on his war scroll. I don't know what you're talking about. Stormcast just don't get to pick a command ability and an item.
Sure. Yeah, it's like a temple, and it's like one of the temples in Daughters. Like, nobody who was watching that was like, wait, which Stardrake are you talking about, Vince? Did you mean the Templar Stardrake, or nobody, right? And it's a really interesting comparison to me, because why is the one absolutely the choice and the other not? Okay, why is the other one basically non-existent?
Mirror Shield and Staunch Defender. It's a shield. It's actual defender. It's actual shield. It's a shield that he has on it.
The reroll ones.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Get a reroll ones.
Yeah. It's the reroll ones that's so great.
Yeah, I think that's the number. Is that the Templar doesn't? I'm checking it now, but I believe the Templar doesn't get the shield for reroll ones.
Correct.
That's the big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he also, there's something with the weapon loadout. The weapon is the non-optimized weapon loadout.
And the Templar's what, 100? I don't have the
60 points less.
Is that all
60 points cheaper?
Yeah.
Okay. It's fascinating to me that he is.
I think he gets the rerolls, but he doesn't have the Thunderous Peel, right?
I don't know.
So the shield is kicking back mortals on the rerolled save, whereas the other one does not get a shield at all.
Right.
What a loser.
0.
and to me, that reroll ones is worth the 60 points. I mean,
yeah, because he goes a 3 versus 3 reroll ones is just night and day.
Yeah.
Sure. No, absolutely true. I do totally agree with that. It was just fascinating to me in thinking about this, right? Of how absolutely different those two things, those two guys are, for a rather minimal points difference. And when you look at their scrolls, at first blush, they do not read incredibly differently. Like, I'm not saying performance-wise they're not.
What's up with that Skybolt bow?
Yeah.
Pew pew.
Right? Like, that Templar can actually have a bow. Did you guys know that?
Yeah, he can have a bow.
No, they all have a bow. All the Templars have a bow.
Yeah, all the Templars have a bow.
Yep.
And it's one shot at 3s and 3s, neg 1 ren.
Yeah, but then it does something like illuminates a unit.
Does it?
Yeah, it's not very good, but it does it.
You add 1 to hit rolls of Dracothian Guard to attack that unit.
Oh,
So good for concussors. Super good for concussors.
It's good for all of them, really.
Yeah, you're right, but it synergizes even more for concussors.
Yeah, because they're stacking hits for additional mortals.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a list. If you run a Dracothian Guard unit, maybe there's a list where you run a Templar. That makes sense.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
or you just pay 100 points for a Lord Celestant.
Yeah,
and just deep strike him where he needs to be on the board. Yeah.
So it was just one of the first things that jumped out at me that I wanted to have the conversation about was how interesting, how minimal the differences can be between two units to make one of them like the perma choice and one of them the just never heard of them.
So
Right,
here's something
like,
I think about a lot with Stormcast is they've got a lot more abilities that are force multipliers compared to other armies. So when I think about my Khorne, there aren't that many choices. There's a couple really good standouts, but there aren't that many choices for example, for command abilities that affect the rest of the army, right? I can make my Bloodthirster a beat stick, but most of his stuff makes him better, right? It's like +1 attack or +1 wound. And Stormcast have some of the most powerful force multiplier command abilities, Staunch Defender specifically.
If I were choosing an army that had force multipliers,
it would be Khorne.
Khorne is not where I would have went to for the lack of force multipliers.
No, I don't know other armies nearly as well. I'm just thinking about.
Yeah,
I'm incredulous right now.
But the thing is, Khorne is also really good. I'm not saying that Khorne isn't good.
Indeed.
What I'm saying is something else that keeps Stormcast up there, along with all the other myriad things we've already talked about, is that they have all of these force multipliers. It's not even just affecting one unit, right? Like the Castellan, he gives his buff to anyone within 6 inches. So he's going to be getting Fulminators and a Star Drake and maybe Unit of Retributors and like some Judicators sitting in the back. So he's giving a bunch of people that
You're saying that the Lantern item gives that buff?
The Tempest, is that the one where he can...
Yeah, the Lantern of the Tempest, yes.
Yeah.
The item gives that 6-inch bubble, indeed.
Right.
But his +1 to save is a single unit.
Sure. Right.
Yeah, I agree. There are multiple force multipliers. Like, so an example of this, like, let me give you a counter. KO. Remember, KO are a big deal that have a lot of force multiplier. No, they have one unit that hands out one buff to one other unit.
Right. So when you stack those bubbles, that makes such a big difference, right? Like with my Khorne, I'm doing my best when the +1 attack bubble from the Bloodthirster overlaps with the extra attacks from the character tilting around with the Crimson Crown. Right, and Stormcast have so many ways to do that.
Yeah, and you have like the Bloodthirster for the run and charge, and
exactly.
Yeah, like
but that's even picking just a single unit that you're talking about again, right?
But there's a lot of buffs that you can stack, and that's what I'm saying. Like Stormcast also have that, whereas like KO, they have like one dude that buffs one thing,
right,
one at a time. It's a good buff.
Which is why you took your Luminarcher.
Not in the same space. Like there's not a lot of other stacking that KO can do, for example.
Completely agree. And the overlapping bubbles that don't have to target something.
Right.
Like the Lord Celestant, his stock ability gives +1 to hit to all Stormcast units within, I think,
it's so good. It's so good.
Amazing. Yep. It's wonderful. That his ability is the argument to me for Consummate Commander. You take who you actually want to be your general, and then you take him to get that +1 to hit. I get it. You're giving up Staunch Defender. The opportunity cost is huge. But if you were trying to get, let's say, I don't know, a unit like Paladors, for example, to get +1 or +2 to hit to beef up their ability to do mortal wounds and also generate extra attacks off of stay blessed weapons. I haven't thought about this. It's just sort of on top of my head.
I mean, there's definitely a synergy set there, especially if you can run a Hurricanum up the back.
Exactly, or some damn terrain.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of revisit the Star Drake a little bit, not to divert from all of this.
No, please.
But I want to go back to Vince's original. So we're kind of talking through units, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if there's one unit that I have a decent amount of experience with post Adepticon, it's a Star Drake. I ran him at everything. I ran him in the Vanguard, which is hilarious to do. Well, Star Drake at 1,000 points.
I enjoyed him.
Yeah. It was
very. You made a lot of friends and won sportsmanship awards.
Yeah, I did. You want to see it? It's behind me, right back there. I ran him into teams with a Lariel at the other side, which was also hilarious. And then in the GT. And the Star Drake is great for most of the time until he isn't, and he's a humongous point sink, like when he gets taken off by a Lord of Change in one round of Magic. Or
that's not different than any big investment unit, though.
Because the Star Drake, it's because he does one thing super, super well, and the other things not well at all. Like he
wins Duality of Death.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, but it's like if you put him in a situation where he can't fight in his optimal situation, like when I was in my Vanguard list, I had to run against an army of only what are they? The big rat.
Storm Fiends.
Predators.
Storm Fiends.
Oh.
Storm Fiends. It was only Storm Fiends, and he literally couldn't do nothing. He was
That's
completely
amazing.
worthless. And or if you go against monsters, he's also pretty worthless. If there's a mortal wound heavy army, you've got 520 points, I think, right? 560.
560.
Yeah, and just
560 is going to get shot off the table.
right. That's going to be gone, and you're certainly not getting your points out of it.
Now those have to be mortal wounds generated by spells.
Correct.
Because if they're generated by like ranged attacks or whatever, like Mirror Shield solves that.
Yeah. Well, but even he got buzzsawed off by the KO in one of my games.
Yeah,
And
he got engine riggered off.
yeah, and so I loved running him, but you feel it when you're going against a suboptimal situation, like more so than you feel it in other situations. Sometimes I feel like he's skewed.
That's something you can preempt, though. Like if you look at the matchup and you see what the big threats are to him, that you can address with play. And I'm not accusing you of not playing him well.
Those riggers.
You've played 25 games with him?
Kind of, yeah. So to some degree, but I mean that gets into another problem that we probably can talk about later. But Stormcast have problems with bodies unless they ally in things. And so if you're going to mono Stormcast, screening is actually harder than you think.
400 points gets you 80 skinks.
Well, I'm saying without allies. I'm saying mono Stormcast with no allies.
But allying is still mono Stormcast.
Oh
it's still in faction.
Okay.
No, but I really think there's a good place in a Stormcast list. And David and I had this conversation earlier this week about there's a good place in the army for 30 witch elves and a hag. There's a good place for 20 arcanauts and a chemist. There's a good place for 80 skinks. I'm sure there's going to be a great place for some Namarti, although they seem like they might be expensive and elite. But
well, yeah, and that's what I'm building. That's what I'm building towards. And going back to my list, the thing that I would do differently is ally in bodies. But if you don't ally in things, you don't have the option to really protect and pick your battles because your Star Trek has to go do things because you're spending so many points on him. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I was like in the vein of Star Drakes. Now, watching him go ham on some Savage Orc Era Boys is amazing, and it's
watching him go ham. Right.
I had one of my best games ever in Age of Sigmar against the Cunnin Ruck in Adepticon, and it was great. It was amazing.
Their arrows dark in the skies, and you just simply fought in the rain.
Fought in the rain.
117 hits. 117. I lost one Palador. It was incredible.
That's pretty good. Pretty good.
I'll take those numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to a couple other guys. There's a couple other Stormcast, some Storm Bros that I want to talk about here. Okay, because I think there are interesting elements in the army that are either quite useful in their role and or not. And ultimately, I do think you're right. I think they have units that fill roles really well, right? That excel at doing that thing. Like Liberators are a great, efficient anvil for what they do. They're easy to buff. They're easy to get to a good save. They hold points well. They're for their cost and blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. I mean, I personally believe that things like Fulminators are pretty good. I'm not sure they'll be the ones that will necessarily always get used. I think there are arguments for other Dracothian Guard riders.
Tempestors?
Or Tempestors, or those are your penalty hit.
Yeah, those are the penalty to hit ones, yes.
Yeah, but as long as those Relictors are 80 points, those things are always going to suffer.
Well, I mean,
like that penalty to hit.
Sure. Like, obviously, the winner of CanCon did both. Right. And was just like stacking up to make sure that most of his enemies were more or less on sixes to hit him all the time. And then
rerolling sixes.
So it's not a pretty combination. Yeah, it's not a pretty combination. I mean, I think Fulmies are still they're expensive, certainly, but I think they can still punch at their weight or above. And there are certain situations where they will just go nuts and be unbelievably good. I'll be interested to see. Obviously, Fulmies, one of their main benefits is against various sort of ranged attacks and sort of the anti-range thing. I'll be interested to see if they stick. If the amount of range in the meta goes down, does that extra part of their value also then erode? Right?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know.
So when I think about big hitty monster things, they're not monsters, but that's not the point. I think the gold standard is probably the Korgorath.
The gold standard.
I think the gold standard of moderately priced monsters for damage output is Korgoraths.
They're super efficient. They're super efficient.
They're incredibly efficient.
They are very efficient. I agree with that.
And I don't know, and I guess Korgoraths don't require terribly much skill to use because charging doesn't matter.
You're just saying pushing them forward.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Well, which is also how you would use fulminators to a degree, but there's a little more to it. You have to make sure you get your charge, basically.
Right, but no, you don't. No, don't. Because if you have your power duo, you have a Heraldor behind them that are going to let them retreat and charge when you turn anyways, and they're going to get that punch.
Now, but are we talking about them as costing 340 points and coming with a Heraldor? Or are we talking about them as 240 points of just Dracothian
just
Guard?
Fulmies, sure.
I don't know that I would ever run Fulmies without a Heraldor behind him, honestly.
Because it's too easy for them to get caught flat-footed.
Yeah. And if they get stuck into a bad fight, you're wasting points. Like, they have to be putting punch.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that by charging.
Yeah. So let's talk about them as having a Heraldor. Talk about 340 points.
Yep.
Which is how much is a Korgorath? 80 points?
80 points. Yes.
Yeah. So that gets you 4 Korgoraths. We're talking about 20 attacks versus the Fulminators put out 6. And they can do 3 damage on their charges, so they can do 18 wounds a turn on the charge. That 4 Korgoraths gets you 20 attacks, max of 40 damage. So
what's
I'm
the
not saying
movement on the Korgoraths?
they move 8 because corn.
Because corn.
Well, you're also leaving off the Dracoth's damage.
Right, and that's what I was looking at.
No, you're right. You're right.
You said 3, but that Dracoth also has 3 attacks.
Sure.
And each one's going to be spitting, on average, 2 lightning attacks as well. So they're going to get 6. So a unit of 2 is going to get 4 spits, and they're going to get 12 attacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm not saying that Fulminators are not. I'm not trying to make the argument that. I'm not trying to make my argument for Korgoraths. I'm just saying that.
You're trying to use it as a reverse baseline. I understand.
Exactly. I'm going with the Liberator argument that we had earlier.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think my argument for them would be ultimately that certainly it's still in 2 or probably 4 or somewhere in that range, never higher. I don't know why you would ever go higher than that. And especially if backed by a Heraldor, they stand a good chance of being able to chew their way through most things. And most importantly, often survive. It's not that they're like the ultimate hammer. It's that they're offensive enough to deal with most of the things that are in their way, and they're tough enough to survive most of the things.
That's what I think is what puts them over the top to me. Not over the top, but like if we're comparing them to Korgoraths, this is their big advantage, right? Like they get reroll 1s on their save. They're looking at 3s instead of 4s on their save, which is huge. I guess that's the rerolling 1s, and they've got the adding 1 to their save in the shooting phase. So.
Yeah, I mean, we all have fought armies with like 1-up Fulmies before, right? That are healing when they roll a certain number on their saving throw. It's like, okay, my response is usually to, unless I'm running an extremely offensive army with a high amount of rend or mortal wounds, just go, okay, those are alive at the end of the game. How do I guess
I'm taking those 6 attacks from the guys on top and the 12 attacks from the guys on bottom the whole game. Yeah, just like how do I win without killing them? Right, like that has been a decision I've made. Pieces.
Right, just like I'll kill everything else, and they'll be the last dudes alive on the table. How do I win?
You had a game like that in Nashcon last year, didn't you? Where it was only the Fulmies that were left alive.
Yeah. I had 2 games like that. Yes, because I played Storm Bros 3 games out of my 5 in that particular tournament.
And that was when I decided to eventually do a cast about how overpowered and the best Stormcast are.
Right there, I made the decision.
This is my vengeance.
10 months from now, yeah.
Play the long game.
I let it simmer for a while. No, those were all great games.
Headcanon accepted.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, can we talk for a moment about the Celestant Prime?
I guess
he's experiencing a resurgence everywhere except for Stormcast armies.
That's true.
I want to unpack that statement. So, if there was ever an alleged poster boy for the whole army, it's him, right?
Right.
I mean, he's
or
got
the Liberator, but yeah.
he's got Prime in the name. He's supposedly like the chief servant of Sigmar. He wields Sigmar's ancient hammer, right?
Isn't
Like,
he just Carl Franz?
no, he's not.
No.
Well, at least, yeah, no.
No, he's Finubar, or one of the Elven Kings.
Oh.
Oh, geez. Anyways, I don't want to talk about the identity of the Celestant Prime, but because it could be retcon to anybody. It doesn't matter what they've already said before. If they decide it's Felix or
Kevin from
Franz
Austria, that's it.
or anybody, they can just retcon anybody they want into it. It's fine. It's a universe of unreliable narrators. Nothing that's ever said ever matters. It can all change on a dime. So sorry, that's the way the canon works in Warhammer. But I want to talk about the Celestant Prime. Dave, I want you to unpack what you just said, because it's
so funny
fascinating to me. So good. Like, dive into what you just said, because I agree. I never see this dude in Stormcast armies. I shouldn't say never. I've seen him like once or twice, but he rarely shows up in Stormcast armies. Let's call it rarely.
And let's point out the fact that Relian's the one that pointed this out. That when I noticed it, that of the three top, let me say it this way: both of the Order armies that were in the top 3 at Adepticon, like there were 3 armies, there was a change host, and then 2 Order armies. Both Order armies had a Celestant Prime allied in.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have one sitting mostly built, waiting for my Ideneth army. I'm gonna probably have it coming in as an ally.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
The Octopus Prime.
What's that?
Octopus Prime. Yeah.
Octopus Prime.
I don't like it. No, I mean, it's
Just have him on top of a giant octopus, and that's what he comes down on.
Yeah.
Space trash. Yeah.
No, it's because it's the advent of allies and the 400 points. He came down in price a little bit. He fits perfectly into that ally slot. He hits super hard. A lot of Order armies, like mixed Order armies or just other Order lists, struggle with reaching out and like deep striking in something that can instantly like take a unit off the table. And if you put your, like, specifically Seraphon struggle sometimes to hit hard, and so the perfect ally in is the Celestant Prime, who can drop in and just wipe something off the table, or he can be used as another gadget piece that can drop as a mobile artillery platform to just drop in those D3 mortal wounds with his strike down. So yeah, I mean, he's a good piece to have. I think the reason he doesn't come up in Stormcast armies is because they already have the ability to deep strike in various ways. And yeah, I mean, I actually don't have. There's nothing wrong with having a Prime in a Stormcast list. I mean, I could write a list like right now with one in there. But
he doesn't actually do too much different than a lot of other pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I did have a list with him in that I was close to running. So
he said I was close to running. I mean, right there. I feel like that's the case. He is. I think the reason you see him as an ally all the time and you don't see him in Stormcast is because the cold hard reality of Stormcast is they have other pieces doing what they need him to do more efficiently.
Yeah.
Ooh, excuse me. I'm very sorry. Whereas, other armies don't.
Yeah.
Right. Like he actually adds real value as an ally. Whereas in Stormcast, he's just kind of more of the same usually. Yep. Right.
That, and like most of the time they don't need him to come in late, where like other armies need that late game punch that he brings.
Yep.
Yeah, he's going to be your turn 4 when you're playing Ideneth, David.
Sure. Yeah, no.
Like he's the one that recovers the title retreat of Ideneth.
Yep. Sure.
Like they pull out and he's like, haha, bitch.
I mean, I literally already have a display board in my head drawn up. No, actually not even in my head. It's drawn up on a piece of paper with the Celestant Prime in the list on a display board. Like I have it drawn up. We'll see what happens. But
you don't even know what the Ideneth units cost.
That's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's not important. They cost. You know what they cost? I do know what they cost, Tom. You ready? Points. Yeah. And the models cost dollars. There you go. And I now have all the information I need.
the army I field with them will somehow equal 2,000 points, roughly.
I don't buy it. I think you guys are full of shit.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to introduce it until you're going to buy them with dollary dues and spend space bucks.
How many points are you playing? Purple.
Exactly. That's correct. Yes. All right. Let's touch on a few other guys here. Let's touch on one of Tom's favorites, because I know Tom's going to have a lot to go on this guy. The Knight Azeros, right, at 80 points. Is this guy one of the best values for your money? Especially, again, sadly, as an ally, but just sort of...
as an ally, man, I love this dude.
Yeah.
This dude is my favorite. He is my jam as an ally.
Yep.
As an actual unit in a Stormcast?
Is he the same problem as the
Yes.
Prime?
Yes.
Is he mini Prime? Same problem?
Yes. Yes, he is. He had some great utility for a lot of armies outside and outside of Stormcast, but for Stormcast itself, he's doing more of the same. And he's not really bringing anything. He's not punchy. He's a buffer.
A hero slot, like you need all you. I mean, not all of them.
Yes,
but I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of people playing 6 heroes.
Sure, like Stormcast easily max their heroes if they want.
And when you're competing for space in a Stormcast armory, here's the reality. I have to make a decision between him and a Relictor. There's not even a conversation there.
Sure.
Every day of the week, the answer is a Relictor. That dude needs to be 50% more. Like, he needs to be 120. The Relictor does, at bare mins.
Well, okay. What I would say is that this is completely a factor of what happened with the battalions. If the battalions had remained reasonably priced to any level of sanity, the Azeros would still be around because he performed a function for those battalions to help things drop in or etc. And then he was really doing something. But yeah, and I guess if you had him with the lantern, but then the Castellan can just do that. So yeah, I agree.
Because the problem is he needs to be a forward unit. That's the problem. He's a forward buffing unit that doesn't actually have. I mean, he has like 5 wounds, 3 up save, but he has no punch. So he needs to be like in between your lines. And so he like on the battlefield as a battlefield role, he doesn't serve a function that a majority of your army can benefit from.
Yeah,
you know, like I throwing him into like a mixed KO list. Suddenly, this dude is given flat reroll 1s across the board to most of your units near him. That's real utility.
I mean, reroll 1s is good for a lot of
like
shooting as
your
well.
adjudicators and maybe a couple prosecutors reroll 1s.
Yeah,
is that worth 80 points?
Probably not. I don't know. If you had I think if you had the Ether Strike Force, he sort of is a real roll there, where he's giving reroll 1s to all of that shooting.
Right, but that's only shooting. Like, and yeah.
That's a lot of That's a lot of very efficient shooting with adjudicators, long strikes. Yeah, the Hurricane crossbows with all their shots rerolling 1s is pretty good. I don't like a Hurricane crossbows, but
yeah, but then you're running into the skew list space as well. Like, yeah. So I just
I'm making a case. I'm not saying it's
I
actually.
understand. I hear it. Yeah. I do. Yeah.
So no, it's okay because you actually pivoted right into the guy I wanted to talk about next, which is Mr. Relictor. Is the Relictor actually the best bang for buck in the army?
Yes. In a Stormcast Legions list. Absolutely. So if I were to tell you, you get a 5 wound, 3 up save hero, right? That's the numbers, 5 wound, 3 up save.
For the Relictor, is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's right.
That can either heal your ally, your multi-wound units, or do mortal wounds and give -1 to hit, and have a 1 prayer per turn in addition to the that buffing that can either teleport your units 24 inches across the board, your slow moving guys, or give bonuses to hit, or all of the other prayer options. I mean,
there's the Battle Shock Immune one.
The Battle Shock Immune one. But or you want to stack penalties to like Battle Shock losses between him and Decimators. I still think there's a fun list there. You know, causing like 7 models to flee every time you do any damage. Anyways, but that Relictor can do any and all of that for 80 points. Like 80 is just asinine for his utility.
Well, here's what I would say. I would say this: there's not much in the Stormcast army that is underpriced. So I think having one unit that is underpriced is fine, because it's not like you're going to have 4 Relictors, right? Like you're not going to sit there and spam Relictors.
There's a Vanguard list that has done very well that says otherwise.
How many
Vanguard wing or Vanguard?
Armstrong was running 3 Relictors in a Vanguard wing.
Okay, well, Vanguard wing is a different story. Vanguard wing is a skew list of Stormcast that will eventually. A lot of things are not true for Stormcast that are true for Vanguard wing, I think.
I would say this: I would run multiple Relictors in any list that I had 80 extra points.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Like if I'm looking for an additional unit, a Relictor is going to be top on that list.
So this is going to be an unpopular thing to say, but if I already had a Relictor, I don't know that I would take a second one over most of the other hero choices. Or, and here's the unpopular part, taking a Gryph-hound.
Oh my god!
I'm actually being really serious. I think Gryph-hounds have
Tell me on half the price. 2 Gryph-hounds.
Oh, no. Don't get me wrong. Gryph-hounds are way overcosted. But in the current meta, they serve a really, really good purpose.
So tell me about what damage your Judicators are going to do. Because that's what your Gryph-hound has to be near your Judicators.
Right. Or later in the middle of a fight when someone's trying to split their blues.
We've had Jake and I have had this argument already,
and I'm actually not trolling for probably the first time in this video.
I understand. I understand that you feel that they are valuable, but I just don't know how you can even make a case like that compared to a Relictor who has these prayers, who has mortal wounds, who has penalties to hit.
I really like Relictors. Don't get me wrong. Don't mistake what I'm saying. I don't.
Would you say you want to be clear?
No. I would like to obfuscate my meaning as much as possible.
Gotcha.
But I can't even fathom a Stormcast list that doesn't bring a Relictor.
Sure.
If you're not taking a Relictor, you're either a genius or you're insane.
I think that's legit. I think that I can't imagine not running a Relictor as they currently are in a Stormcast list.
Yeah, but I think, I agree. And I think they are very efficient for their points. I don't find them broken, only because there aren't other things in the Stormcast army that are terribly underpointed. So, that's just...
I don't think any of us are saying they're broken, but they're a
really
1+ unit for sure.
Yeah.
And if they were... I would still take them at 100 points. Probably still take them at 120. I would
still take one at 120.
120, that's tough.
Oh, I know, I agree. But
who else is going to provide your prayers for you? A Veriton at 120?
But Veriton's 140. You're getting into Veriton territory. He's more value. He's more useful as the ability to unbind spells.
When's the last time you saw a Veriton on the table?
Well,
because
that's only because the Relictor is so much cheaper. But if all of a sudden the Relictor is only 20 points cheaper, then it makes a really good case for the Veriton.
You mean instead of -1 to hit?
Sure, maybe. I'm just saying. I got hurt bad by spells in all my games because I had nothing to do against it. It's just all right, just hit me.
And you think a Veriton's gonna pull that extra weight? What I would say is this: I had tons of unbinds at bonuses, at +2 and +1s at the event, and they didn't really do anything for most of the event.
But it gives you a chance.
It does. It gives you a chance. It does.
Yeah.
But if I'd rather take the -1 to hit, honestly.
I think of Relictors super similarly to Blood Secrators. You shouldn't leave home without it.
You can
make an argument for 2, and I would definitely still take it at 40 points more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because they also fill a bunch of different roles.
Yeah. They're an unbelievable Swiss Army knife that's just doing so many different things that Stormcast need to do.
Yep.
Right.
And they can then just apply it to each thing you need it to go on.
Right. Yeah. They're fascinating to me. I think one of the interesting things, we should wrap this up soon. We've went on for a while about a bunch of different items. I'll toss out some last moment things here. Go ahead.
Can I push on the one thing that I said to David this advice about building a list at Acon, and as I dug into it, I think that you're right in your assessment, David. Let's talk about the lack of viable battalions right now.
Yes.
It's funny because that was going to be what I wanted to talk about there at the end. which was so. Let me pause the battalion for just a moment. Talk. I want to close on that.
Okay. That's fair. Yep.
I want to say how amazing it is that this army is as competitive and that we found all this stuff. When you think of all the, let's call it competitive dead weight that is still in this force, that's how big it is, that it can haul the anvils around of the theoretically dead weight this army's carrying. And if you don't believe me right now, like I saw in the comments earlier, somebody said they have 2 to 3 bad units and everything else is good. All right. I'm going to start reading units. Okay. And I would like you to tell me if you think they are good, please speak up. All right, here we go. We're gonna rapid fire this. All right, everybody ready? We've already talked about a couple of them. Aether Wings. The
Good.
birds. You're gonna defend the birds?
Absolutely. Charging out of phase and tagging something when they're about to charge something that's important to you. David, you can't tell me that's not useful. I did that to you with Furies with Blood type. It's the exact same thing.
But again, for the same points, you can get a Relictor.
No, that's 20 more points.
It is 20 more points.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever.
You're in the same space, though.
Same ballpark.
Right. Or you could, for 20 points cheaper, you get a Gryph-hound.
All right,
See, I like where you're going.
Sure.
I think there's a place for 1 and 1.
Okay, so we've got 1 defender for Aether Wings. Good enough.
Staunch. I am staunch in my defense of the Aether Wings.
That's fine. 1 strong. I understand.
We all make mistakes.
Decimators.
Oh God, you're hitting all Jacob's buttons.
I will say this.
I actually do like decimators. I will come out and say that. Only if you're using them in a way where you're stacking to not the AoE attack is junk. Like most of the time, like that's not where the money is. It's that penalty to jack up the like losing models because they like add to their stuff, and there's a number of like there's some bravery debuffing, adding, the holy terror or whatever prayer. Like I think there's some synergies there.
Decimators are one of the only answers to hordes that Stormcast have in faction, if we're not talking allies.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a pretty garbage answer, would be my argument, but sure.
And I agree with that. Like I've had
them open up a can on my bloodletters.
Well,
I don't think that they're perfect. Right. I think that they're a fun answer.
They're definitely playable. And I think they can see there could be lists that are very viable with them.
All right, let's call that 1.5 in favor of Decimators. Desolators.
Yes, I love them.
The Dracothian Guard.
What?
Yes.
What are those?
The Dracothian Guard, actually.
He doesn't know they are.
Give me 6 of them for 720 points, and you get 36 attacks.
Okay.
What are those again?
It's the Axe Fulminators.
I get you.
What are those?
Yeah, I understand. We get
Axe Fulminators.
Oh my God! Stop it! One of you stop. The Night Quester.
Who?
Oh, poor guy.
The Night Vexillor.
Oh man, talk about just a plummet from grace. Like this guy.
This guy, champion in the beginning. He's cleaning out toilets now. That's
dude. You know, every Vexillor now is an alcoholic who's telling the stories of their former glory.
I used to be the best, man. I was the best.
What I will say is this. That ability to throw 1 unit forward is not bad, especially if you have Retributors on the table. What that gives is that gives a unit of 10 Retributors second life. After their first drop, it gives them a second drop. Now, that said, despite what I just said, at 140 points, I'm not a buyer.
Well, because a Relictor can do it for 80 points.
Well, because I want to say this, and let me be very clear. All old Vexillors are all just Relictors now. They just use those models
they just immediately became Relictors. Yeah. All right, Lord Veritant. We already mentioned him. Anybody want to stand up for this guy?
Go ahead, David.
No. I was simply making an argument for argument's sake. It's not a email.
It's not defensible. I accept.
Yeah. No, it's fine. You got it. You beat me.
Celestial Hammer Prosecutors.
Yeah.
Who?
I hate prosecutors.
Exactly.
No.
All right. Let's see. Who else should we go to here? We already talked about. I think that's Vanguard. How about Vanguard Hunters?
I think there's a list out there, but I can't figure it out.
they don't do anything well enough to field them.
They have 10 shots on 5 models.
Yeah, it's
that's
sad.
the worst defense I've ever heard.
You know,
they hit on 4s and
You know who else does? Arcanaut Company.
Yeah. So
they have 15 shots on 7 models and 3 light skyhooks.
This was the saddest thing for me is that I got really excited about them, just as like models and in theory, and I built them and then tried to put them in an army to make them work, and I couldn't do it. And the way I do it, I don't usually build units and not that I don't plan to play with, and they're sitting unpainted. It makes me sad.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention other people who might be on the cusp, by the way. Like, I blew past stuff
like Hurricane Crossbow.
Hurricane crossbows.
For those, man.
Stuff we've already discussed, like the Templar, Drakesworn Templar, and all that, right? Like, there's the Paladors and that kind of stuff. Like, there's all sorts of, hey, there's middle ground cusp people. That's all I'm saying. I went for the bottom of the barrel, and that's a pretty decent size.
I think it's the Paladors.
Hunters are really good in skirmish.
When was the last time?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, Skaven are pretty good in Shadespire, but I don't know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, you know who the king is in skirmish? The knight of heroes. Because his little lantern pops the entire battlefield that he's around.
Knight Heraldor is the best. Knight Heraldor is the best unit in skirmish.
Yeah, when David and I play with his friends who don't play Warhammer, he always takes a Heraldor. And he beats them every time. It's great.
I can't imagine.
You just toot at them and then kill them because it's all buildings.
And then he uses a Heraldor.
You are a terrible person.
All right, let's close out talking about battalions. So go ahead. This is I'll throw this over. Tom, David, or whoever wants to lead this.
I really like. I'll say it this way: the battalion the upcharge that happened with 2017, just kicked them in the junk. Stormcast, because they were already on a tight budget with their models and their bodies and stuff like that, and unit costs, and now going to 200 points per battalion, which is generally what it is almost across the board. And their mega battalions are at like 240 or 280, so you're investing almost a quarter of your army if you want to do a 1-drop mega battalion. It's simply insane. Like, I wanted to make Hollow Knights work so badly. Like, I ran the numbers because I wanted to do a 1-drop Hollow Knights with the hero battalion and doing the whole gig. And I wanted to do like a viable kind of like your 1-drop Vince for Iron Jaws. Mm-hmm. The numbers, you just can't get enough on the board. Yep. It's not possible. And I've looked at all the other stuff, and it's just not there.
Yeah, I agree. I think they got hit the same way that Sylvaneth kind of got hit in the new GHB, where the battalions skewed a little bit too far in the other direction, where all of a sudden you just can't run them. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of really fun things you can do. And I think what happened was there were a few outlier battalions like Thunderstrike Brotherhood that kind of caused the hammer to get dropped on all of them when I'm not sure that it was necessary. And they suffer due to drops in games. So you get outdropped in the majority of your games, which, can be mitigated to some degree. In my experience, I mitigated that by just putting units in the sky. Table. Yeah, well, I just put units in the sky until they had to start dropping, then I could drop around. But then that's a risk in itself, because their ability to come from the heavens is most of their armies can do better than them. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. The best Stormcast list are those that are high drops, that are no battalions right now. Yeah. Other than obviously like Vanguard Wing. But it's a skew kind of corner case. Yep. So. Yeah, no, Vanguard Wing is still absolutely viable, and probably, I would say, probably the most just straight up competitive Stormcast list still, even with the FAQ. Right, I would agree with that. If you dropped all those battalions 40 to 80 points, I think that you might suddenly have a resurgence of some viable lists. So if we see a battalion rebalancing again with GHB 2018, which I would expect we will. Yeah. Given the current recent battle tomes, that's right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you look at the recent battle tomes, what you see is a wider spread, right? Where things seem to be more aligned. So given that we might see some of those points move, does that then really upend the world of Stormcast in a big way? Because suddenly, if multiple battalions become viable again, or combined with theoretical new battalions that show up in, because if they open a new chamber, there'll be a new book, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what comes that's new, honestly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to me, the whole Vanguard, all the Vanguard Stormcast, if all of a sudden there were magically new battalions that came in and that were appropriately pointed, that gave them new rules to make them more hitty or something, right? Make it to where makes them theoretically a battalion that makes, when Vanguard hunters come on the table, they have rend or something, right?
Sure.
Then all of a sudden you'll see a resurgence in those models, which are underused, and just create a whole new Stormcast would look a lot different, probably.
Yep. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. All right. Any final Stormcast thoughts? Any final lightning bolts before we go? David, final thought.
Paladors are underrated. They're beautiful models. They play well on the table. I don't care. Don't listen to what Tom says.
I will definitely agree with the beautiful models part. Also, really, what I love about that kit as well is it's an old style cavalry kit where the knight, like the guy riding, and the beast are literally completely separate models.
Yeah.
It's none of this like the foot is half molded into the beast thing, which drives me bonkers. So thumbs up for that.
No,
you can switch the riders real easy.
David, to your credit, like I want them to work.
Yeah.
Like, and what I mean, like when I started running the numbers, trying to figure out find a battalion that would work, I went to Paladors. I went to all the new Vanguard stuff because those were the ones that that's actually the stuff that I wanted to make work. Because I thought it would be neat to have a competitive list utilizing that stuff. Yeah. And it's just
Yeah, and I think kind of my overarching thought of Stormcast is that they don't play themselves. There's not a list maybe besides Vanguard Wing that you can play that doesn't require some decent level of generalship because of their shortcomings in bodies and against mortal wounds and all of that. So that's kind of my sense of Stormcast. I have a lot of fun playing with them.
Cool. All right, Jacob, final thoughts, sir.
There's more than Staunch Defender, and Griffhounds and Aetherwings definitely have a place in more lists than they're in. People should play them. People should try them.
All right, I dig it. I do like your point is well taken. Charge interruptions are an extremely powerful mechanic. On that, we are aligned. I'm not sure those birds are perfect, but charge interruptions are good.
I didn't even call them efficient.
Sure. They have some use. How about that? There you go.
If you use them intentionally for what they're supposed to do, you will catch people off guard and you will put them in situations they don't want to be in. And if you can't take advantage of that, then you suck. But I wouldn't expect someone who uses them properly and then doesn't capitalize. Like the generalship there, you have to be a good general and then a bad general in exact succession.
Nice. Well, hey, the broken clock's right twice a day, so you never know. All right, Tom, final thought. You've had all this time to think of it, and now you did nothing. Okay.
Nah, I just I want Stormcast to be successful. And I think that a lot of the elements are there. I think that you can build very solid lists. I had a friend that is just getting into Stormcast or getting into AOS. I recommend, and he's a great general. He's a very tactical individual. And I recommended to him that he do Stormcast. Because I know with the tools in that toolbox, he will perform very well. He'll get a feel for the game, and it's a great, introduction into AOS. And so I still think that it is I have a Stormcast, stuff over here that I may end up putting together and just painting for fun. Because I think that it's a good force. I think they need that. I think they need a viable battalion to just give that little extra push into the competitive world. That's not Vanguard Wing. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
All right. Rock on. Well, there you go. That brings us to a close. I hope you enjoyed. This is apparently our yearly review of the current state of Stormcast in the Mortal Realms. I'm sure if another chamber does crack, if Sigmar cracks another cold one, well, then we're gonna have to talk about that. But until then, it'll
be after the new starter box that drops this summer with the new undead units.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, given where the Malign Portent story is at, it's hard to imagine that we don't see a starter box of Stormcast versus Death, right? Yeah. So, but until then, there you go. I hope you all enjoyed this little discussion. I thank you all very much for watching. David, Jacob, pleasure, gentlemen. Look forward to seeing you both in a couple months at Nash Con, and I hope to see you there too. The link is in the show notes. Sign up, follow what David said is the crazy sign up thing. It's not that hard. It's not hard. It's not hard. You can figure it out. And if you've got any questions at Nash of Sigmar on Twitter, hit him up. It's in the show notes as well. So give a follow, or you can hit him up with a question. But as always, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next Wednesday.